Imagine living in the same house for 30 long years, your laughter in the walls, your memories in the floors, your dreams stitched into every curtain, every old photograph, every creaking door frame. And now imagine watching the front door slam behind you. Not because of a mistake you made, not because life took an unexpected turn, but because a 25-year-old stranger, a woman your husband secretly loved, stood there, staring at you with a smile sharp enough to cut your heart open, telling you, "This home isn't yours anymore. Get out." That is exactly what happened to Martha Claymore, a soft-spoken grandmother from a small farming village in the Midwest. A woman who spent her entire adult life believing marriage meant loyalty, honesty, shared burdens, and shared dreams. She devoted herself to her family, to her husband, to a home she believed would always be her safe place. She cooked in its kitchen, mended clothes beside its fireplace, raised her children within its walls, and prayed every night that she would grow old and die peacefully under its roof. But life, as Martha learned in the most brutal way, doesn't always reward the loyal. Sometimes it hands them their worst nightmare wrapped in a legal envelope. Before we dive into the heartbreaking and shocking story of how Martha's life was destroyed, rebuilt, and transformed in ways she never imagined, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Stories like this, real human stories filled with betrayal, heartbreak, secrets, revenge, and justice, are posted here every week. You don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's go back to the day everything changed for Martha. It began on a gray morning, the kind where the sky felt heavy, as if it knew something terrible was about to happen. Martha was sitting on the wooden porch swing her husband, Clyde Claymore, built for her on their 10th anniversary. She still remembered the sawdust stuck in his hair, the way he pretended it wasn't hard even though he'd never built anything before, and how he presented it to her like it was a throne carved out of gold. Back then, she thought that was love. She thought he built it for her, only her. But that morning, the swing creaked beneath her weight as she held the letter from the lawyer in trembling hands. Clyde had died just a week earlier, quietly, suddenly, in his sleep. Martha had cried until her tears ran dry. She blamed the stress of the farm, the long winters, maybe even the years of arguing about money. But never, not even once, did she imagine a different kind of truth hiding in the shadows. According to the envelope, she was requested to appear at the law office in town to hear Clyde's final will. She wiped her eyes, straightened her old wear-upon cardigan, and made the trip alone. Their grown children lived in different states and hadn't yet arrived for any estate matters. Martha still felt numb from grief as she stepped into the lawyer's office. The smell of coffee and old paper settling around her like a blanket she didn't want. Double quotes, Mrs. Claymore. The lawyer said gently, motioning her to sit. "I'm afraid today won't be easy." Martha nodded, clutching the straps of her handbag. "Nothing has been easy since he passed." The lawyer hesitated, cleared his throat, and took out a document with Clyde's signature. "Your husband left a will, and everything, his land, your home, the savings, the vehicles, every asset listed under his name." He took a long breath. "It all goes to a woman named Ruby Stone." For a moment, the world went silent. It wasn't that she didn't hear him. It's that her mind refused to process it. The kind of refusal that happens when a truth is too painful to accept, too unbelievable to fit inside your chest. Martha blinked. "I'm sorry, who?" The lawyer's voice was steady, but his eyebrows furrowed with sympathy. "Ruby Stone. She is listed as your husband's longtime partner." Partner. The word punched her harder than the name. Then the lawyer continued, "Because the nightmare wasn't finished. She is 25 years old. According to the documents, 25. A child compared to Clyde. young enough to be Martha's granddaughter. Martha's hands began to shake. This has to be a mistake. Clyde would never. But the lawyer held out photographs, signed, dated, and filed with the will. Pictures of Clyde with a young woman, smiling, holding her, and in one photo, kissing her. The air left Martha's lungs. Her heartbeat stopped and then returned with a violent thud. She felt as if the floor beneath her chair cracked open, and everything she had built for 30 years tumbled into darkness. My husband had a girlfriend. The words tasted bitter. I'm afraid so, the lawyer replied softly. She was a call girl when he met her. A call girl. A stranger. A secret. A betrayal woven into her marriage behind her back. Martha's vision blurred, and he gave her everything. Yes, he slid the document closer. Legally, she owns the property now. Martha remembered gripping the edge of the desk to keep herself from collapsing. But the worst moment wasn't in the office. The worst moment came when she drove back home, her home, and found a sports car parked in the driveway. Loud music played from inside, and when she opened the front door, there she was, Ruby Stone. Young, beautiful, expensive makeup, red lips, perfect hair. Wearing one of Clyde's old shirts like it belonged to her. Oh, Ruby said with a smirk. You're the wife? Martha could barely speak. This is my home. Not anymore, Ruby said, holding up the will like a trophy. Clyde wanted me to have everything. You need to leave. Today? Martha felt her soul crack. But I lived here 30 years. Not my problem, Grandma. And with that, Ruby shoved Martha's suitcase toward her feet, packed with the few clothes Ruby deemed old lady trash. Martha stood in the doorway, the world spinning, her heart torn apart. Her husband had taken everything from her and given it to another woman. And now, she was being thrown into the street like she was nothing. But the universe wasn't done with Ruby, not even close. Martha didn't remember walking away from the house. She only remembered the sound of the door slamming behind her. The same door she had opened thousands of times with love, routine, patience, and trust. Now it was closed to her forever. The gravel crunched under her shoes as she stepped off the porch for the last time, her small suitcase dragging behind her like a wounded limb. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the driveway, and for the first time in her life, she felt like one of those shadows, thin, forgotten, fading. A bitter wind cut across the fields as she walked toward the bus stop at the end of the road. Her village had always been peaceful, its dirt roads lined with tall oaks and farmhouses that smelled of fresh bread and hay. She once loved this place. She believed she belonged here, but now she felt like a ghost drifting through a world she no longer recognized. As she sat on the wooden bench, clutching her cardigan tight, 1,000 memories crashed into her. Clyde proposing to her under the old barn light. Their wedding, simple but beautiful. Raising their 2 children, who were now too busy with their own lives to care much about hers. The nights she waited up for Clyde when he worked late at the farm. The mornings she made him breakfast before tending to the garden. The anniversaries, the laughter, the tears, she had held on to every moment, believing it was part of a love story. Now she understood it was only her love story. His had been divided, and a part of it had been hidden from her for years. When the bus arrived, she stepped on, her heart heavy. She sat by the window, staring out at the passing fields. Every farm, every fence, every mailbox held a memory of her life with Clyde. And yet, she was no longer part of this world, not legally, not emotionally. She felt like she didn't exist. The bus dropped her off in a nearby small town where she had lived before her marriage, a place she hadn't seen in decades. The train tracks still ran through the center. The same diner still had the neon open sign flickering. And the same old man sat on the corner bench feeding birds. The place looked frozen in time. But Martha was not the same girl who had left it. She found a cheap motel and checked in with the little money she had left from her personal savings. Less than $500. The room was small but clean, with faded wallpaper and a faint smell of lavender. She placed her suitcase on the bed and sank into the creaky chair beside the window. And that's when the tears finally came. Not the silent ones she shed after Clyde's death, but deep, violent sobs that tore out of her chest. How could he do this? She whispered to the empty room. 30 years. 30 years. She cried until her throat burned and her eyes swelled. When she finally stopped, she looked at herself in the mirror on the wall. Her face was wrinkled, tired, older than she remembered. But there was something else, something she hadn't seen in herself in years: strength. The kind of strength born from heartbreak. The kind that made a person rise when everything pushed them down. Martha wiped her face and took a slow, steady breath. "No," she whispered. "I won't disappear." Because the truth was this: Clyde may have given Ruby everything on paper. But Martha wasn't going to let a call girl rewrite her life's worth. She had loved that man, raised his children, built that household, and she wasn't going to vanish quietly. The next morning, she walked to the local library, a place she hadn't visited since she was 17. She used one of the old computers to search for Ruby Stone. It didn't take long to find her. Ruby was not just any call girl. She had a reputation. A trail of wealthy older men she charmed and discarded. She was known for manipulation, blackmail, and squeezing money out of desperate men. Clyde was just another victim. Except this time, Ruby had hit the jackpot: a house, land, and money worth over $1 million. As Martha stared at Ruby's online photos, her flashy dresses, expensive vacations, jewelry dripping from her neck, anger tightened inside her like a spring. How did he fall for this? Martha muttered. But deep down, she already knew. Clyde had been lonely. Their marriage wasn't perfect. There were arguments, distance, long stretches where they barely spoke. But Martha thought they were just going through life's normal storms. She didn't know he had chosen another woman to soothe him. She closed the computer and leaned back in her chair. Well, she whispered to herself, if Ruby thinks she's won, she's wrong. Because Martha realized something important. She still had one thing Ruby didn't. The truth. And if the truth came out, Ruby's entire world could fall apart. But Martha wasn't ready yet. She needed strength. She needed allies. She needed a plan. So she went to the diner across the street, hoping a warm cup of coffee would help her think. She sat in a booth by the window, staring at the people walking by. The waitress, a kind woman named Denise, noticed her swollen eyes and shaking hands. "Rough morning?" Denise asked gently. Martha gave a small smile. "Rough life, lately." But something about Denise's kindness cracked something open in Martha. The loneliness, the fear, the humiliation, it all needed somewhere to go. And before she realized it, she began talking. She told Denise everything: Clyde's secret life, the will, Ruby kicking her out. The diner was quiet, the morning sun flooding through the windows, and Denise listened without interrupting. When Martha finished, Denise slammed her hand on the table. "Honey, you're not letting that girl get away with this." Martha blinked. "But the will is legal." Denise leaned closer. "Maybe. But the truth has a way of tearing down lies. And you've been quiet too long." For the first time since Clyde's death, Martha felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she wasn't powerless. Maybe she could fight back. And she would. Because Ruby Stone had no idea who she had just kicked out of that house. And Martha wasn't done yet. Not even close. That night, Martha lay awake in the small motel bed, staring at the ceiling as the old fan rattled above her. Denise's words echoed inside her mind. "You've been quiet too long." Maybe that was the truth. Maybe she had spent too many years swallowing disappointment, smoothing over arguments, and convincing herself everything was fine. She had played the role of the patient wife, the forgiving mother, the quiet woman in the background. But something had snapped inside her. Something fierce, something tired of being ignored. By morning, she felt a shift in her bones. She wasn't the same woman who had been thrown out of her home like garbage. This new version of her had a fire burning, fueled by humiliation, betrayal, and the desperate need for justice. After getting dressed, she headed to the town square where a small legal aid office stood between a thrift store and a barber shop. She hesitated at the door, knowing that whatever she did next would set everything in motion. She wasn't sure she was ready for a fight, but she knew she couldn't go back. Inside, the office smelled of paper and old carpet. A young attorney named Benjamin Reed looked up from his desk, surprise flickering on his face when he saw her. "Good morning," he greeted. "How can I help you?" Martha took a seat, folding her hands in her lap. "My husband passed away recently," she began, "and I found out he left everything to a woman he was having an affair with." Benjamin blinked, clearly not expecting that. "I'm sorry. That sounds incredibly painful." "It is," Martha admitted softly, "but I'm not here to cry. I want to know if I have options." Benjamin leaned forward. "Tell me everything." So she did. The secret relationship, the will, Ruby kicking her out, the decades she spent in that home. Benjamin listened carefully, occasionally jotting down notes, his expression tightening as the story unfolded. When she finished, he sat back and let out a low whistle. "Mrs. Claymore, Martha," she corrected. "Martha," he said gently. "This is a complicated situation. Legally, if the will is legitimate, the assets do go to Ruby." Her shoulders sagged. "So there's nothing I can do." "Not exactly." He tapped his pen against the pad. "You said your husband was involved with Ruby for years." "So the lawyer said, and she was a call girl." Martha nodded, embarrassed even though the shame wasn't hers to carry. Benjamin frowned. "That raises questions. If your husband was under manipulation, coercion, or if there was any sign of mental instability, undue influence, or fraud, the will could be contested." A spark ignited in Martha's chest. "You mean I could challenge it?" "You could," he said. "It won't be easy. It could take months, maybe more, and Ruby will fight you hard." Martha's jaw tightened. "Let her fight. She already took everything from me. I have nothing left to lose." Benjamin smiled, not pity, but respect. "Then I'll help you." She didn't know why, but hearing those words made her eyes sting. For the first time since Clyde's death, someone was on her side. They spent the next hour going through paperwork, discussing next steps, and preparing the foundation for a legal battle. Benjamin explained that they needed evidence, proof that Clyde wasn't acting of sound mind or that Ruby manipulated him. Martha mentioned Clyde's recent memory lapses, the confusion he sometimes expressed, the days he seemed lost on the farm. Benjamin nodded thoughtfully. "That could help. We'll need medical records, statements from people who noticed changes in him, and any proof showing Ruby's involvement." Martha sighed. "Ruby probably has all the personal documents now." "Don't worry," Benjamin assured. "We can get what we need through proper channels." Leaving the office, Martha felt something she hadn't felt in days: purpose. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting, and she wasn't fighting alone. That afternoon, she returned to the diner, hoping to see Denise again. The bell above the door jingled as she walked in, and Denise waved her over with a warm smile. Well, Denise asked, setting a cup of coffee in front of her. What did the lawyers say? I can fight it, Martha replied, her voice steadier than before. He's going to help me challenge the will. Good. Denise placed a hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you think. Martha smiled weakly. I don't feel strong. None of us do, Denise said, until we have no other choice. They talked for a while, and Martha couldn't help but feel grateful for the unexpected friendship. Denise didn't know her, didn't owe her anything, but she treated her with kindness. A kind of kindness Martha hadn't felt from anyone in a long time. As the sun began to set, Martha decided to take a walk through the town. She passed old storefronts, children playing on the sidewalk, and elderly couples chatting on benches. The simple scenes of ordinary life soothed her. She had lived in the shadows of Clyde's choices for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be part of the world. Her walk eventually led her to a small park with a pond at the center. Ducks glided across the water, and the air smelled of pine. Martha sat on a wooden bench, letting the calmness seep into her bones. But peace didn't last long. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello, a familiar, venom-laced voice hissed through the speaker. Well, you didn't crawl away very far, did you? Martha's stomach dropped. Ruby, you bet. Ruby's tone dripped with mockery. I heard you're planning to drag me into court. Cute. Pathetic, but cute. Martha forced her voice to remain steady. I'm doing what's right. What's right? Ruby laughed harshly. Honey, what's right is that Clyde wanted me. He chose me. You were just the old farm wife he kept around for chores. The words stabbed Martha like knives, but she refused to let Ruby hear her pain. You won't get away with this, Martha said quietly. Oh, I already have, Ruby purred. You're homeless, alone, broke, and I'm living in your house, drinking wine in your kitchen, wearing your husband's shirts. Face it, you lost. Martha's fingers tightened around the phone. Enjoy it while it lasts. Ruby scoffed. Please, you're nothing. And I'm going to crush you if you try anything. Then the line went dead. Martha sat frozen, trembling with fury, not fear. Ruby thought she was weak. Ruby thought she was finished. Ruby thought the fight was over. But Martha knew something Ruby didn't. It had only just begun. Martha sat on that bench long after the phone call ended, staring at the calm water while a storm brewed inside her. Ruby's words echoed like poison. You're nothing. I'm living. In your house. He chose me. For a moment, the weight of everything threatened to crush her again. But then something inside her hardened, like steel forged in fire. No more crying. She whispered to herself. No more breaking. She rose from the bench with a slow, determined breath. Ruby wanted her to crumble. Ruby wanted her to feel small. But Martha was done playing the part of the quiet wife in the background. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't invisible. And she wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. The next morning, she returned to the legal aid office with a notebook full of memories, dates, and moments she believed could help Benjamin build a case. When she arrived, he looked up from his messy desk with a tired smile. You look different today, he remarked. I feel different, she replied, handing him the notebook. I remembered things that might help us. He flipped through the pages. These are good, he said. Very good. They show a pattern. Your husband was confused, forgetful, even disoriented. Long before he signed that will. I think Ruby used that, Martha said quietly. She knew he wasn't thinking clearly. Benjamin nodded. Undue influence. Manipulation. Exploitation. This is exactly what we need. For the next hour, they worked through Martha's notes. marking important details and piecing together a timeline. Benjamin noted the sudden, large withdrawals Clyde had made in the last year, withdrawals Martha had never known about. He pointed out inconsistencies in Clyde's behavior. The more they uncovered, the more Martha realized just how deeply Ruby had woven herself into Clyde's life, and how thoroughly she had erased Martha from it. When they finished, Benjamin leaned back in his chair. "We're building something strong here. We have a real chance." Martha inhaled deeply. "Good, because she called me last night." Benjamin's eyebrows shot up. "Ruby called you. What did she say?" "That she'd crush me," Martha said. "That Clyde chose her. That I was nothing." Benjamin's jaw tightened. Intimidation. "Good. We'll document that too." Martha blinked. "That's useful?" "Extremely. It shows her character, her approach, and her fear that you might succeed." For the first time, Martha felt that Ruby wasn't untouchable. She felt a spark of hope, small but bright enough to keep going. When she left the office, she felt lighter. She decided to call her daughter, even though they hadn't spoken much since Clyde's funeral. Her daughter, Elise, lived 3 states away and had always been distant, never cruel, just busy, wrapped in her own world. When Elise answered, she sounded distracted. "Mom, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later?" "It's important," Martha said, keeping her voice steady. "It's about your father's will." A pause. Then a sigh. "Mom, we went over this. Dad's choices were Dad's choices. You don't understand," Martha said, her throat tightening. "He left everything to a young woman, a 25-year-old girl he was seeing behind my back." Another pause. But this one wasn't dismissive. It was shocked, cold, silent. "What?" Elise whispered. "Dad had a girlfriend." "Yes," Martha said. 4 years. And she kicked me out of the house." Now Elise's voice trembled. "Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want to burden you," Martha admitted softly. "But I can't carry it alone anymore." "I'm getting on a flight," Elise said immediately. "Tonight." Martha froze. "What?" "Elise, you don't have to. I'm coming," Elise insisted. "I should have been there." "I'm sorry, Mom." For the first time in weeks, Martha felt something warm rise in her chest. Her daughter was coming. She wasn't alone anymore. That evening, Martha met Elise at the motel. When Elise stepped out of the cab, she rushed straight into her mother's arms. "Oh, Mom," Elise said, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Martha held her tightly. "It's not your fault." Inside the small room, Elise listened to the entire story, every detail, every betrayal, every insult that Ruby had thrown at her mother. When Martha finished, Elise was shaking with anger. "She kicked you out." Elise growled. "From the house you lived in for 30 years. "She did," Martha whispered. Elise stood abruptly. "Then she's going to regret it." And in that moment, Martha realized something important. She wasn't just fighting for herself now. She was fighting for her family, for her daughter, for every piece of her past that Ruby had tried to erase. The next day, Elise accompanied her to Benjamin's office. Together, they added more details, more insights, more evidence. Elise was fierce, asking questions Martha never would have thought to ask. She pointed out that Clyde's sudden secrecy over the last year wasn't normal. She remembered strange phone calls, unexplained expenses, and excuses Clyde made during holiday visits. Benjamin scribbled everything down. "This is becoming a solid case," he said. "Ruby won't be able to hide behind the will forever." Martha felt stronger with Elise at her side. She wasn't that fragile woman who had been shoved onto the porch with her suitcase anymore. She was becoming something else, something steadier, braver, harder to break. After their meeting, Elise insisted they drive past the house, not to confront Ruby, but because she wanted to see the place her mother had been forced to leave behind. When they arrived, Ruby's sports car was parked in the driveway. Loud music blasted from the open windows. There were wine bottles scattered on the porch. A couple of Ruby's friends lounged around laughing, drinking, smoking. Elise clenched her jaw. This is disgusting. Martha's heart twisted, but she forced herself to stay calm. This is who she is. As they sat in the car, watching the scene unfold, Ruby stepped outside wearing one of Clyde's old jackets. The one Martha had sewn a patch onto last winter. Ruby smirked when she spotted their car. She strutted toward them, heels clicking on the driveway. Well, Ruby purred, leaning toward the window. Couldn't stay away, huh? Elise rolled down her window just enough to speak. Her voice was ice. We're not here to talk to you. Ruby blinked, caught off guard. Oh. Then why? We're going to court, Elise snapped. Enjoy the house while you can. Ruby's smile cracked, just for a second. But Martha saw it. A flash of fear. Then Ruby recovered, tossing her hair. Cute. You think you can win? We don't think, Elise said. We know. Ruby's eyes darkened. You're going to regret this. Then she turned and stormed back up the porch. Elise looked at her mother. She's scared. Martha nodded slowly. She should be, because this fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, Martha woke with a steadiness she hadn't felt in years. Elise was still asleep in the motel bed across from her, exhausted from travel and fury. But Martha felt awake, sharper. Like the fog that had smothered her for months had finally lifted. She made 2 cups of cheap motel coffee and sat by the window, watching the early sun creep across the parking lot. For once, the light didn't feel harsh. It felt like a beginning. By the time Elise stirred, Martha already had her notebook open again, adding small details she remembered during the night. Elise blinked at her in surprise. You're up early, she murmured. There's work to do. Martha replied simply. After breakfast, they returned to Benjamin's office. He greeted them with a stack of documents and a look of cautious excitement. I found something, he said, tapping the papers. Martha felt her heartbeat pick up. Elise leaned forward. What is it? Benjamin turned the top page. Bank statements. Transfers Clyde made in the last 6 months. All to Ruby. Large amounts. Some labeled as gifts, some as loans, and he pointed to a line. One marked as medical reimbursement. Martha frowned. Medical. Benjamin nodded. Except there's no record of Clyde ever receiving treatment at that clinic listed. But Ruby did. Twice, Elise's mouth dropped open. She used his money and disguised it as his medical bills. Benjamin's expression hardened. That's fraud. And coupled with the will, with his declining mental state, this becomes much more than a civil case. This becomes criminal. Martha's hands trembled, not with fear, but something fiercer. Hope. Justice. Vindication. She thought she was clever, Elise muttered. She thought no one would ever look. But we are, Benjamin said. And the more we find, the more she'll panic. Double quotes as if on cue. Benjamin's office phone rang. He frowned at the caller ID. It's Ruby. Martha felt the air shift. Benjamin answered calmly. Benjamin Carter. Even across the room, Martha could hear Ruby's shrill, shaking voice through the receiver. Stop digging. Ruby snapped. You're harassing me. You're harassing Clyde's wishes. Benjamin cut her off with quiet firmness. Ms. Porter, if you call this office again, I will document it as harassment. And if you threaten my client, I will ensure the court sees it. A beat of silence. Then Ruby practically hissed, she's going to lose. You both will. Benjamin hung up without another word. He looked at Martha. She's scared, and scared people make mistakes. Elise exhaled slowly. Good. Martha didn't smile, but something inside her settled. A steady flame. A certainty. We keep going, she said. Benjamin nodded. I'll prepare the preliminary challenge to the will. You to gather anything you can. Photos, messages, witnesses, receipts. Anything that shows Clyde wasn't fully himself. When they left the office, Elise squeezed her mother's hand. Mom, we're really doing this. Yes, Martha whispered. We are. That afternoon, they visited old neighbors, friends, and even the pharmacist who had known Clyde for years. Everyone remembered something. A lost prescription, a confused conversation, a strange visit Ruby made alone on Clyde's behalf. Small pieces, but together they formed a picture. A picture of a man slipping, and a woman exploiting every crack. By evening, they returned to the motel with a folder full of statements and testimonies. Elise sprawled on the bed, exhausted, while Martha organized the papers with a calm intensity. But just as Martha placed the last page into the folder, there was a sharp knock at the door. Elise sat up, startled. Who is that? Martha slowly approached. Another knock. Harder this time. Martha opened the door, and there stood Ruby. Her hair a mess, mascara smudged, the confident smirk gone, replaced by something jagged and desperate. Enough, Ruby spat. You're ruining everything. Elise jumped to her feet. Leave. Right now, Ruby took a step inside, pointing a trembling finger at Martha. You think you can take my house, my life? Clyde loved me. Martha didn't flinch. Not anymore. Clyde didn't know what he was doing, she said quietly. And you took advantage. Ruby laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was nervous, cracking. You don't know anything. I know enough, Martha replied. Ruby's eyes darted to the folder in Martha's hand. What's that? More lies. More? It's evidence, Elise snapped. And you just added to it by showing up. Ruby froze. She looked at Martha again, really looked, like she was seeing her for the first time. Not as a fragile woman she could shove aside, but as a threat, a real threat. Ruby's chest rose and fell quickly. Then she backed away, stumbling over her own feet as she hurried down the walkway. When she reached her car, she shouted, "This isn't over." Martha watched her drive off, gravel flying behind the tires. Then she closed the door softly. Elise stared at her mother in awe. Mom, you didn't even blink. Martha sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the adrenaline fade, replaced by something steadier. No, she said softly, because I'm not afraid of her anymore. She looked at the folder, everything they had gathered, everything Ruby had tried to hide. This ends with the truth, Martha whispered, and for the first time, she believed it 2 weeks later. Martha stood outside the courthouse with Elise and Benjamin beside her. The morning air was crisp, but Martha felt strangely warm, steady, grounded, unshakable. Today was the hearing. Today, the truth would finally step into the light. Inside the courtroom, Ruby sat across from them. Gone was her confidence. Gone was her smirk. Gone was the smug, taunting woman who had thrown Martha out of her own home. Ruby looked pale, jittery, tapping her heel against the floor. Her lawyer whispered urgently, but she kept glancing at Martha, like she couldn't understand how the woman she once bullied had made it this far. Benjamin placed a reassuring hand on Martha's shoulder. Just breathe. We've got her. The judge entered. Papers shuffled. The hearing began. Benjamin presented everything. The sudden changes in Clyde's behavior. Photographs of him looking lost and disoriented. Witness statements from neighbors recalling. Ruby visiting pharmacies on Clyde's behalf. The fraudulent medical payments Ruby disguised. And Ruby's late-night threatening call, which Benjamin had recorded. Each piece was a nail in Ruby's coffin. Ruby's lawyer tried to object, tried to twist things, but each attempt made her look worse. And when the judge asked her directly about the fake medical reimbursements, she stuttered, turned red, and finally snapped. Clyde wanted me to have everything. He loved me, not her. She was just his wife of 30 years. The judge asked sharply. Ruby froze. Silence swept across the courtroom. Martha didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth was speaking for her now. When Benjamin finished, the judge leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Given the evidence of manipulation, financial exploitation, and clear undue influence, he said, this court rules that the will is invalid. Ruby gasped. The judge continued, voice firm and final. All assets and property will be restored to Mrs. Martha Whitlock. Furthermore, given the fraudulent transactions, Ms. Ruby Porter will be investigated for financial misconduct. Ruby shot to her feet. No, you can't do this. That house is mine. He promised. Sit down, Ms. Porter, the judge warned, or I'll hold you in contempt. But Ruby didn't sit. She turned to Martha, eyes wild, desperation twisting her face. You ruined my life. Martha rose slowly. She didn't shout. She didn't tremble. She simply looked Ruby in the eyes and said, you ruined your own life when you tried to steal mine. And Ruby went silent. Security escorted her out as she cursed and screamed, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her power gone, her mask shattered. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, sensing the scandal, the drama, the downfall. Elise wrapped an arm around her mother, beaming with pride. You did it, Mom, she whispered. You took everything back. Martha exhaled a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. We did it, she corrected softly. When they arrived back at the house, her house, Martha paused at the gate. It looked different now. Not haunted, not painful. Just hers again. Ruby's things had been removed by the sheriff earlier that afternoon. The porch was clear, the music silenced. The bottles gone. Martha and Elise stepped inside. It was quiet, peaceful. Martha walked through each room, touching the walls she had painted, the curtains she had sewn, the memories she thought she had lost forever. In the living room, Benjamin called with an update. Ruby was arrested, he said. Fraud, identity misuse, and for forging a signature on one of Clyde's checks. Martha closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek, not a sorrow. Of victory. Thank you, she whispered. When she hung up, Elise hugged her from behind. Justice, she said softly. But Martha shook her head. Not justice, she replied. Balance. She walked out onto the porch, breathing in the evening air. The sun dipped low, casting warm gold across the yard, the same yard Ruby once smirked at her from. Now, Ruby was behind bars. And Martha, she was home. She stood tall, shoulders back, no longer a woman broken by betrayal, but a woman who reclaimed everything stolen from her. And more. As the sun disappeared, Martha whispered into the breeze, I'm not nothing. I was never nothing. And for the first time in a long, painful journey, she finally felt whole again.